Hello, welcome to the April 28th online content. It's a little different this week, and it's for a reason. Usually, what happens is we do the Zoom, and then it converts, and then I post it later in the night. But then I realize this is when I'm going to be covering writing out your 4x6 cards. And I thought, well, it's probably not a good idea that you guys only have access to it for only 2 nights before your speech, for only one night before your speech, because it usually gets posted at after 10 and usually it's up and running like around 11 or so. So I thought, well, if I can get this out sooner, I thought about it this weekend and I made a decision early today that I'm just going to cancel the Zoom and we're going to go online to online only. That way, you have access to this. I'm hoping to get this post. I just finished my teaching at ELAC, so get this posted as soon as I can. All right, so without further ado, let's go over. Sponsored by Pepsi. Let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're going to cover, get it right off the bat, and we will have two participations today, just like always. So keep that in mind. So the very first thing we're going to do is cover is how to write your cards, your 4x6 cards. This will be representing the 4x6 card part. See if I have. Oh, I can just use this. I always forget to get stuff before. All right. So 4x6 cards are the only thing you can bring up while you're giving your speech. By the way, all speeches are happening on Thursday. You're going to show up. You're going to we're going to go through the evaluation form, and then also you're going to go ahead and we're going to go over timekeeping, and then first 5 people we're going to speak, stay in the room, rest go outside, and yeah, and then we turn them out. And as after your group speaks, you're done for the night. It's a pretty quick night if we get done and so forth. All right. So the only thing you can take up with you when you speak is your 4x6 cards, not 3x5, not a folded piece of paper or cut in half piece of paper, 4x6 index cards. The Southgate Target, Walmart, I know for sure has, they're the bright colored ones, but they have them. And I believe Target over in Southgate has them. And then, if there's an office supply store, Staples and all those places have them and so forth. Right? I don't know about drugstores, but they usually don't. So just FYI. So yeah, 4x6 cards. And what you do with them is you take your outline. And remember the outline, two basic short sentences, all my rules. So what you do is you take your outline and then you have you take, like, there's 5 parts: the intro, 3 main points, and the conclusion. 5 parts. You take one of those parts, you designate, because you need 5 cards. You designate it. So you have the intro card, the 3 main point cards, and then your conclusion. Even the conclusion, which is about 30 45 seconds, it is yeah, it's done that way. It's done that way because I showed you in class when I was throwing the cards that you have a card each, because every time you go through the card, you know the transition. All right. So how do you write up the cards? Well, it's pretty simple. Like your attention giver, for example, right? You do something like this, AG, right? And then you take your words, your 2 basic short sentences, and then you keyword it. You make it even easier for you to just look down and you elaborate. Remember, we're doing a type of speech where you have notes and you elaborate from the notes. You're not reading out the card like no 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 no. You're not doing that. You're looking up, you're looking down, and you're going and you do it. All right. So the 4x6 card. But remember what I said. My analogy I use. You ever find yourself driving down a long road where the destination is so far away you can't see it in the distance? So you start getting distracted by the trees and buildings as you pass them by. That's what I think about when I think about my future. Boom, right? I'm going to actually make this. You actually, your 4x6 cards will probably have more space. It's focusing on the. It's for focusing on this. It's out of focus. All right. Anyways, drive road, trees. So I have to make this even smaller than normal, but I wanted you to be able to see it. But your 4x6 cards, that's the other reason why we go by 4x6 cards and not 3x5. So you still have plenty of space and they're easier to hold on to. So you notice I didn't write everything out. I just wrote down AG and then I wrote, drive road. I'm not going to come up and speak and go, drive road, trees, trees. No, I'm not going to do that. But what I'm going to do is look down at my notes and I know I'm going to say stuff because I practice. I practice and I looked at it and I go, you ever notice when you're driving down a long road and the destination is so far away, you start getting distracted by the trees and roads. I'm trees and buildings as they're passing by. That's what I think about with my future, right? I elaborated from some words right here. And then I do it for each one. And by the way, I like to use, and if I were used, I would use two different colors. I would recommend like two colors that contrast blue and black. It works, but like black and red or black and green if there are green pens out there, but you know what I mean. But black and blue works as well. Background. And I'm gonna stop here. Ooh, don't tell me this is running out. Good color too. Up and close and person. My place is still a mess. The stair. This door is never used at all, ever used at all. It's usually blocked off. All right, background. Right, background is next. And again, background. Just a reminder. I'm gonna say this again and again. The background is not your background. It's not your background. It's not your background. And the background is not a background to the job you're gonna go run off to someday or anything like that. It's a background for your thesis. And my background's so easy. It was like, remember, I let in and say, when I think about my future, what that leads into the idea of becoming a famous film director. Film directing is a way for me to use my experiences and show my creative side to a wide audience. Boom, that's the background, right? Because my thesis is I'm telling you the journey to becoming a famous film director. Remember when I was in high school, one of my possible careers that I was thinking about doing was film directing because I love movies, right? The whole industry and all that stuff. So background, right? Film equals. I may even show you a little trick you can do. Film equals career. It's you don't have to write out the whole word. Again, and also I'm also limited because this little board I use doesn't give me enough space. I have one of these hidden behind the Van Gogh thing, but it's not. I'm not. It's stuck up there, so I'm not sure. All right, so see this background film equal career. No, I'm not gonna sound like that. Not gonna sound like gay person. I'm gonna come up and say something like, when I think about my future, I think about the fact that film directing is a viable career option for me. It uses my past experiences and gives me the ability to show my creative flair. Boom. Right? I have some keywords down here. I even use some. I use a symbol. I don't have to be too elaborate. Whatever is comfortable for me to elaborate from. The one thing you don't do is ever, 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 ever write out your speech. Ever. Because when you do that, you're going to be one of these people that goes, you're never going to look up. Right? We want to connect with the audience. We want to show eye contact. So, for your speech, just write your lines with keywords and symbols, whatever you do, so you can look down, remind yourself what you're going to talk about, and do it. And the way this works is when you practice, it gets a repetition, and it works like a charm. How does it work? How does it? Because we use the structure. And what better way for me to demonstrate that by actually doing the speech? So what I'm going to do right now, because I didn't prepare. I'm going to get into our canvas. And by the way, oh, the canvas is already logged in. So on early. Where do we find the? Oh yeah, I'm not sharing the screen. I'm not sharing the screen. Where do we find the important documents? Files. We find it in files, right? So I'm in your guys' canvas right now. I'm going to files, and look, there's the outline. I'm going to put the prompt for your first speech in there. Actually, why don't I just do it right now? I'm talking to you guys. I'm thinking about it. I'll just put the prompt in right now. Doesn't hurt to be prepared, right? First speech prompt. Here it is. I'm worried. Well, I'm not going to bring it up, but it's there now. So let me share screen. So as you can see here, I'm in our files, right? I'm in my view, but it's essentially the same thing. Again, all the important documents are in files. I'm going to go to the outline. I'm going to bring the outline right in front of me so I can see it. Right? Boom, there it is. Right? Pretty simple. Pretty simple stuff. Now, before we do that, let's go and random. You guys saw a little bit of what I looked up. We saw Radio Garden. Radio Garden lets you job generator, title generator. All right, random Radio Garden lets you listen to the radio station across the world. I listen to German news radio. Right. Pick a random job. I'm gonna pick a random job. Real estate agent. Let's look for a fun one. Not fun, not fun. Security guard, landscape. Ooh, landscape architect. I've never done a speech on landscape architect. Let's do a speech on landscape architect. By the way, the ad was for murals. Guess what shoes I love to wear? I got to get them repaired, but I have like 2 sets of murals. So they're supposed to be my work shoes, but I never wear it. Oops. All right, here we go. I'm going to do a speech on being a landscape architect. You saw me. I didn't have it prepared ahead of time. Let me just get my bearing. You're going to hear crunching because when I recycle, I always crunch my cans and my things. Something I used to do for my mom. All right. So landscape architecture, like that. That's close enough. I'll just use the clock and estimate. All right. So 5 minutes, 5 minute speech. Oh, I got to think of the attention getter. Let's see. A landscape architect. Ah, there we go. I like analogies, so you know I'm going to use an analogy. All right. There's the clock. There's the second hand. Are you one of these people that likes to watch the big budget movies? You know, I'm talking about like Dunes, the Star Wars, and so forth. And you see these epic scenes and these sets. They're so elaborate, and it takes a while to plan, and they got to put them in the right proportion, and so forth. Now, I don't want to create the next big movie set, but I want to create a beautiful scene for someone's lawn. Landscape architecture is one of the things that is my hidden passion that I got from all my years. Now, not everyone here wants to be a landscape architect. Heck, you maybe never heard of this position before. It seems like I haven't. But maybe my story can give you ideas. I know who I am. I know what I want to be, and I've done the research. That is why I'm going to be telling you about my journey to becoming a landscape architect. It's the ability to use my past with also my creative side in the realm of landscape. Landscape. So I'm going to first talk about uh, growing up growing up with my dad. Then I talk about um, what I'm doing to get the job, and then finally, myself in the industry. Enough about telling you about my journey. Let's start about talking about uh, growing up. When I was a kid, just like any young man, young boy, you look up to the male figures close to you. For me, it was my father. My father. By the way, this is not me. I'm making this speech up. By the way, um, my my father was a blue collar type who had all these jobs. And it seemed like the job he loved the most was gardening. In fact, what little space that we had to live in, he had his own garden on the side. He and I would go out with him to work. Now he would do when I would go out with him with work, it's like on summer break and so forth. We would go around and I would push the mower, get the clippings and all that stuff. And it would also have my chance for me to see all the different kinds of gardening experience landscapes out there, commercial, residential. And then also my dad didn't we didn't have that. We grew up poor. My dad had to work, paycheck to paycheck. And so growing up the way he did, he had his own little slice. You know how apartments have a little backyard and they have a little bit of dirt? Well, he made that the most fanciful bit of dirt. And I helped him with that to be able to show what he had in his own personal space, express himself. And it always stuck with me. Enough about growing up with my dad. Let's talk about uh, what I'm doing for my career. Landscape architecture doesn't really have a degree out there. There's not a long line at the local college to become a landscape architect. But to be able to do it, I'm doing it with getting degrees in business management and also practical experience. Let's talk about degree. If you're creating a business where you're going to be in charge of people's landscapes, it could be a residential or a large commercial space. You need to have something to prove that you know what you're doing, and a college degree doesn't. In fact, you're more likely to get a lot of things in life if you have an education. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to be doing that in business management to show the banks and companies that I have a background in business administration. You can get a BA in it. And also, while I'm doing that, I'm going to be getting minors in architecture and taking any elective that helps me with my creativity. It could be an art class, it could be lots of different things. But then there's the practical experience. Now, I used to be, helping my father as a gardener, but now I have the ability to work full time, and I've gotten a position working at one of the major businesses, uh, being their gardener, being their hands-on person. So while I'm going to school, I am paying for my bills and so forth. Enough about what I'm doing for the job. Let's see myself in the industry. It's not something that happens overnight. In fact, even after years after my education, I see myself still having to prove a name. So to do that, I'm doing that with the strategy of establish my own business by getting, but also recognition with whatever local organizations. So I've already said I'm going to get a college. I'm gonna by this time I already have my degree and so forth, and got the loans to get my started with as a landscape architect, and to grow my business from that position of growing it. You got to do it by business and word of mouth, being able to have the online and presence and so forth. But another thing you can do is there's lots of local organizations that give awards for best lawns and get featured in magazines, and that's another way for me to work my way into um, the local community when it comes to landscape architecture. So enough of this, enough of where I see myself in the industry. Let's wrap up the speech. First, I talked about growing up with my dad. Then I'm talking about what I'm going to do for the job, and then finally myself in the industry. You know, it, people don't understand it when they hear it, but I'm going to tell you, you already know my journey to becoming a landscape architect. It's again a way for me to show my creativity and use my experience in my past. So the next time you're watching the big movie and you're seeing their elaborate set and so forth, know that those techniques and those ideas can be applied to your local lawn by someone like me. There you go. That's a speech. I'm way over time. I think I did. I was making that up. My dad was not a car. My dad was a blue collar, but he was no gardener. Um, but I was making that off the top of my head. So why did I just do that? I took a random job and I made a speech out of it. And I made up all that stuff is because I'm letting you know this structure I gave you for this class works. That's it. That's the reason why I did that. And so what I'm talking about works. I'm going to get out of stop share for a second. So that's why you heard that. It's my fault. I should have got my phone and got the. I should have used Google. Oh well, enough of that. Let's go and finish up some chapters and all that stuff. All right. And by the way, just a reminder: when you see these videos, it links back to my YouTube channel where you can find past videos about helping you and so forth. And go make sure you go to the announcement as well. The announcement has my cram session video in there, the last minute review. Oh, before we continue, what we're gonna do right now, before we do that, we're gonna do our first participation. Remember I showed you how to do this about taking your two basic short sentences in a section, like I did with the intro, and making it into some keywords for you. What I want you to do for your first participation for 5 points, and let's try to get both the participations in the same reply. So maybe if you want to scribble it off to the side and wait till later for the other participation, that way you can put it all at once. What I want you to do is take one of your intro sections and those two basic short sentences for your attention getter or your background or speaker credibility and so forth. And I want you to make your own line similar to this. Probably has more words because again, I was confined by the space of this dry erase board. But make your own line. And what you can do is after you post yours, then you can maybe look at the other students and practice elaborating from their words. But yes, it's show us what your comfort, what your words are that you're comfortable posting because it's what is easiest for you to elaborate. That's why I mentioned comfort. The most important thing about the speech is to be comfortable with yourself, right? Don't put too much pressure on yourself. You're going to be fine. It's going to be fine. All right, let's go. All right, I need to do this real quick. All right, we're going to go back to the slides. We're going to finish up some chapters and all that stuff. All right, so chapter 11, I believe I did not cover it. Last time we were at, click on this. So last time we were here and we went through the spectrums at the very end of listening. We were here last time. So now we skipped a bunch of chapters because I actually there's like six parts to the book, six parts to the book, and part one, part two, and part four is in this part of the class, and the rest of them, three, five, and six, are in the second half of the class. So that's why there's a skip. All right. Chapter 11 covers your organizing your speech and the way they're organized. And each of them have a certain organization to them, including your first speech, which we'll cover. So when you see an organization on this slide, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, it is possibly on the test. Yeah, it's going to be on the test. I mean, come on, there's like five of them. That's an easy multiple choice question for me to make with only four options. Here we go. I'm going to go through these quickly. So topical organization, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. It is it's what I call the choose your own adventure option. It is where the speaker chooses three things that they want to focus on the most, and they have a natural division to them. So what do I mean by natural division? If I'm doing a speech, a very popular speech for students is turtle speeches. And if I do a turtle speech and I say three things that people want to know about turtles, and like if they want to raise their own turtles, for example, you can, breeds of turtle, types of turtles, the eating habits and nutrition for turtles, main point too. But then if I do something odd, like the history of domestication for turtles, that's out of place. Obviously, you would put something like habitats for turtles instead of the history of turtles, because history would be in somewhere else. So your topic organization, you could throw three things out there, but they have to be kind of related. They have to have a natural flow to them. They're not something that's not out of the and out of the ordinary. And so here's three ways to do it. Primacy. Primacy. These three words are not on the test. Topic organization might be on the test. Oh, by the way, topic organization is the number one choice for students for their second speech. So primacy is those type of people who, when they have like the latest hot gossip, they got to say the most important stuff first. So when it comes to your main points, the most important main point is main point one. You want to get it off. You want to get it off your chest. You want to get it out there as quick as possible. So main point one is the most important. Main point two is less important, and main point three is the least important. That is primacy. Recency, and by the way, recency is spelled like that. It's not regency, it's recency. It's a not as utilized word in the English language. But anyways, it is when it's those people when they get gossip, they save the best for last. That's recency. So your main point one is the least important. Main point two is the most is more important. Main point three is the most important. That's recency. When the last main point is the most important. Finally, there's complexity. So topic organizations, you will have students do by complexity. And complexity always goes from simple to complex. It always goes up. It doesn't go complex down. It goes simple to complex up. So what I mean by that, I had a student years ago did a speech about yoga, right? By the way, yoga is a great tool for lots of different things. If you lift weights, you should do yoga. But complexity works like this. Yoga, like I had a student who did a yoga speech. Obviously, main point one, level one yoga. Main point two, level two yoga. Main point three, level three yoga. So it started off with the basic yoga positions, the downward dog, well, I have them on my board over there. Namaste and all the basic, lying on your back ones. And then it goes up to, the warrior, and then the more, in the main point two, and then the more complex pretzel type yoga poses that are main point three. It goes from simple to complex. That's how it works, right? So that's topic organization. Very important because it's a very popular thing. You get to choose your own main points. The most important thing about it when it comes to your decision making on main points, natural division, right? Nothing out of the ordinary in there. Chronological organization, hint, hint, nudge, nudge on the test. Definitely this one, because the fact of the matter is you're doing one right now. Chronological organization is when the speech runs via time order or placement order. And what I mean by placement order is this. Well, let's go to time order first. Time order is obvious when you think chronological, right? And so our first speech for your journey to whatever job you're going to be end up with, you're going to go past, present, future. That's chronological. That's past, present, future. If I'm doing a speech on history, right? If I'm doing the Civil War, start of the Civil War, the middle of the Civil War, the end of the Civil War. That's chronological. Placement order or order itself is like if you're doing a speech on making a cake, right? You have get the ingredients, prepare everything, then cook. That's the order of baking a cake. Anytime you taking steps, just like any IKEA instruction you ever have, you're not gonna skip pages, go back and forth. You're gonna go along the chronological order to that IKEA instructions. Same thing with this speech. If you do anything like how to build something or how to bake something, chronological organization is how you use it. Spatial organization, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. It is any time you are telling, again, the order of something, but this time it's by physical location, right? Chronological is time and an order of doing things, right? Spatial has to deal with the physical location. Two ways that happens. One is spatial organization is a road trip, right? I'm teaching a class in Southgate and even my ELAC classes. There's a good percentage of you who've been to Vegas, right? If you live in Los Angeles, there's a good chance you've been to Vegas. And usually what happens when you go to Vegas is you start off in Los Angeles, main point one. Main point two, you stop to get something halfway through, usually Barstow, main point two, and then you end up in Vegas, main point three. That's spatial organization, right? Just think about those people. I usually ask the class who's been the longest drive in the United States. There's usually a halfway point. That's main point two. So starting point, midpoint, end point. That's a good spatial. And you might think, but isn't that time wise? Because you're going in, not necessarily, right? When I talk about the major cities, and when I first went to Germany, the major cities I went to, my first one was Frankfurt, and then Munster, and I consider Munster a major city because that's where I lived the entire time I was there. But my first major city after Munster wasn't in Germany, wasn't until I think it was like a month and a half after living there. It was Berlin. So time is, it's a physical distance. All right. You might take longer in parts of the journey, but the physical thing is the point, right? The other thing on physical location is also kind of like is physical location, and your book uses cell walls. I don't like the cell wall, the cell organization example. I think castle is a good one. So it's physical. If you're like talking about how a castle is put together, and you talk about the inside of a castle, that being main point one. Then you talk about the walls of the castle. That's main point two. Then you are talking the outside of the castle, main point three. That is also in physical order by physical distance and so forth. That's how that works. Spatial organization out of all the organization is least use. Cause and effect organization, possible hint, hint, nudge, nudge. It's anytime you try to change someone's mind, what causes it, what happened and the effects of it. Anytime you're trying to change someone's mind about what happened. Well, why'd you guys break up? Oh, because they became crazy. Cause and effect, right? You're not actually changing behavior, you're changing someone's mind, because before they didn't know that person was crazy. But now, because you explain it to them with the cause and effect type organization, now they know. Problem solution. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Your third speech is a problem solution speech. Definitely going to be on the test. Problem solutions, anytime there's an issue and you have the solution. Anytime you have a problem and you have the solution. So I use the breakup example for cause and effect. Why you break up? Because that person's crazy. Problem solution. You need to break up with that person. That's the problem. They're crazy. Solution. How do you break up with them? That's how it is. Think about it on a bigger scale with social issues. The organization is going to be on the test. What might also be on the test are the evidence, soft evidence, and hard evidence. These are easy to remember, but it's important that you know as well. Soft evidence is anytime you have to explain something, elaborate, any of that stuff. Anytime you reason, anytime a witness testimony, any of that kind of stuff. That's soft evidence. Hard evidence is exactly how it sounds. It's more physical, right? Soft evidence is out there, your reasoning, your mental thoughts, all this stuff. Hard evidence is more physical in nature. How many people suffer from this illness a year? This many people, right? You can point to those people, right? You talk about homeless. I was talking to a student today about the homeless issue. And one of the big differences between New York City and Los Angeles in homelessness is that New York City has done a better job at getting people, the homeless, inside in shelters and so forth. They have a 30 to 40% unsheltered rate, meaning that they're out there on the street somewhere. While here in LA, it's close to like 70%. I think it's lower now, but it's still. And by the way, that's a big, Los Angeles is the exception, but usually blue cities or blue state cities is more like New York City, and red state cities are more like Los Angeles. Just FYI. So yeah, problem solution. That's I'm sorry, I was looking at the screen. But hard evidence is it's physical nature. You can point at it. You can point at it. Right? How many books do I have on display? I can count it. That's hard evidence. What are they talking about? That's soft evidence. You see the difference there? There it is. How many Legos? Don't ask. Don't ask how many Legos. It's way too much. Way too much. All right. Organized main ideas, right? The reason why you learn about these organizations is because that's how we talk. We do this, right? Hey, what happened with you this weekend? Oh, I got 3 things to tell you about. Topic organization. How was your weekend? Well, it first started off, we had to make this appointment at this time, and then we had to be at this place over at this time, and then we ended up the night over here. Chronological organization. Where did you go? Well, I went to the south part of LA first, and then I found myself in Hollywood. And then much, much later, we ended up in the Inland Empire. Don't ask me why. We were doing the GTA 5 version. I don't know my GTA. Don't tune me on that. That's spatial organization. Cause and effect. Why did you do that? Well, I've been down lately, and I just wanted to get out, and that's what made me do all that crazy stuff. Cause and effect. Right? How you can't be going out like that. I know. I have an issue. I think what I'm going to do is take up crochet. Problem solution, right? We talk like this. And so your audience also talks like this. And so when you do that, it's a familiar space for you and your audience. That's why we organize it. And it's easier to follow as well when you have that organization. That's the main reason why, really, is it's easier to follow. Not just for your audience, but for you. You have the structure there. You just follow the structure and it works every time. Right? I came up with this brilliant thing that I'm going to be doing every semester. Unfortunately, we already passed them. And well, no. I just realized something today. I was talking to a student about something. The way I teach this class is that you can take, oops, you can take what I teach you, the organization I teach you, these organization patterns, the outline, and all that stuff, right? You can take all that stuff and you can apply it to so many different ways. You know, I at the beginning of the semester, I told you whatever you learned in high school doesn't work. Why? I'll show you why in a second. But the way I teach you and what public speaking classes, college level teach you is something different. Teach you the basics, the fundamentals that you can apply for all these different things. So let's take three different types of speakers that you know of. You have your history teacher, you have your politician, and you have your salesperson, right? The problem with high school teaching is this person right here, this history teacher, this history teacher might be proficient in explaining history because they're what I call conventional public speakers. They're great at their game, but when it comes, they're not. But politicians should not be talking like a history teacher. And you, I know I'm in the small screen, but I don't want to get out. I don't want to get out. Your politician should not be talking like a history teacher, and definitely a salesperson should not be talking like a history teacher. But what happens with us in public speaking is we give you this structure, this format, this either our outline that we give you or the organization patterns I just gave you, and you can take any of that stuff and you can apply it to all of this stuff, all the different types. That's the difference. That's why I tell you to throw out anything you learned about public speaking before you got to me, because that history or English teacher is really good at speaking on that subject, but it doesn't apply to politician or salesperson. Our stuff does. Our techniques, our tactics, our organizations do. Right? Speech patterns. There's 5 of them, right? That we teach you. Topical, chronological, and spatial. The ones on the top are mostly used for informative. You can use them for persuasion, but for the most part, they are informative in nature. So for your second speech, you can choose any of those 3, right? There's a little bit of a restriction on chronological, but topical, chronological, spatial, across the board, informative in nature. All right. Cause and effect, problem solution are persuasive in nature. I'll say it again, persuasive in nature. Now, for your second speech, you can choose cause and effect organization. No one does, and I would highly recommend you don't. But you can do problem solution to cause and effect in a informative way, an unbiased, neutral way, as long as it's like maybe a history type speech. But for the most part, cause and effect is changing minds. Problem solution is usually changing behaviors. Anytime you are changing anything about somebody in a speech, it's like asking someone out on a date, you're being persuasive. You understand the difference there? So cause and effect, problem solution mostly deals with changing minds. So they are naturally persuasive. We do this, I already mentioned it, I'll mention it again. Audience recognizes these patterns. This is how we talk to each other out in the real world. When you take it and formalize it and put it in our structure, they recognize the structure because they do it themselves casually every day. That's why we do this. That's why we teach it. And so you have these things that people are familiar with. All right, I'm going to take a short break. So I'm going to pause it and I'll come right back before I continue. All right, I'm back. All right, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna try to get these chapters out of the way. We're gonna save one of the chapters for later before the midterm, but we're going to try to get these chapters out of the way. Because chapter 12, oh, wait, no, I forgot. Chapter 11 has one more thing. All right, I already mentioned it in some of your guys' feedback, but chapter 11 has these things called signposts, hidden, hit, nudge, nudge, not just for the test, but signposts in general for the remainder of the semester, because signposts are super relevant. Super relevant. All right. And what do I mean by that? Um, so what I mean by that is this. You if you look at your outline, you have uh, signposts in there. Signpost is anytime, this is the definition. Signpost is anytime you give your audience cues on where to go in the speech. And what I mean by that is simple. So when you do a preview of main points, I'm going to first talk about my rough neighborhood, then my degree, and finally myself in the film industry. That's three things I'm directing my audience to. This is the roadmap, hint, hint, nudge, nudge on roadmap. But this is the roadmap I'm giving to you. That's a signpost. That's a preview of main points, it's directions. And anytime you transition in your speech, that's a signpost. I just talked about I introduced my journey. Now let's talk about my rough neighborhood. I just talked about my rough neighborhood. Let's talk about my degree. I just told you about my degree. Let's talk about the film industry. Just talked about the film industry. Let's wrap up the speech. That's it. Those are signposts. And your review main points. I just told you about my rough neighborhood, then I told you about my degree, and then finally where I see myself in the film industry. It's past tense, but it's still directions. All right. Signpost is the most important term, the most important thing on this thing. There are words on here I'm going to tell you not to care about, but they're on here so students don't look at the book and say, hey, why is this one not on there? By the way, if there is ever a term that's highlighted that I don't put on there, the main reason why is because I forgot. Preview. Anytime it's a thing. Your preview main points is a preview. All right. I don't like one of the things about the main point summary is they use the word summary, but it's really you summarizing your main point, and there's a slight preview at the end. But when it comes to your signposts, your preview main point is the preview. And when you are in your transitions, every time you say we're going here, you're previewing to your audience where you're going. So that's a preview as well. Initial, internal preview, we don't care about those words. Move on. Transitions. We already covered transitions in class, and for your outline, we'll cover it again here. Anytime you give your audience directions, I just talked about this. Now I'm going to talk about that, the A to B directions. I just told you about this. Now I'm going to tell you about that, the A to B directions. All right. So make sure you're aware of doing that. And that's why we use the 5 cards. Because every time you go to another card, you're going between parts. And anytime you're going between parts, you are transitioning. I just told you about my rough neighborhood. Let's talk about my degree. That's a transition. One word, by the way, all in your outline and even in your words, it's one sentence worth of words. Preview main points, commas, and ands. I'm going to tell you about my childhood, then my degree, and finally the industry. Transition. I just told you about my degree. Now let's talk about the industry. Transition. One sentence worth of words. Verbal transitions. I've been doing it, right? The words. Non-verbal transitions. This is like, I'm going to tell you about my childhood, then I'm going to tell you about my degree, and then I'm going to tell you about the industry. By using the hand gestures, I'm doing nonverbal. But most of the time, nonverbal transitions are your PowerPoint slides. Specifically, when you just change the slide. Now, personally, I don't use animations. And when you do your PowerPoints, animations are not allowed. But anytime you switch the slides, it's a transition. So that's a good nonverbal transition. I can't show you here, but sometimes I'll show you the class. I don't want students to do it, but in the debate club and classes and competitions, they have what they call a speaker triangle. Sorry, I'm just trying to time myself. Summary is when you wrap it up. Your review of main points is a summary at the beginning of your transitions. I just talked about my childhood. That's a summary as well. This is different than the main point summary because the main point summary is actually it works more like a preview. But don't get confused. These we're only talking about signposts here. Sorry, I brought it up. Final summary, internal summary. Don't care about those words either. That's more advanced stuff. Don't want you to care about it. All right. If you again, as always, when we go to slides with the online content, you can always save your question for when we meet on Thursdays. Thursdays are required. And I said this on Thursday, and I'll say this in class and on the online content. Really, the most you can miss on a Thursday is one class. If you're missing an 8-week course and you're missing 2 Thursdays, I'm not allowed to tell you to drop, but all right. Organization of the speech pattern. You're leading your audience. This is why signposts are so important. You're leading your audience to what you want to do. Remember, I said when I talked about the introduction, your introduction is just a setup, right? And your conclusion is just a wrap up. Your actual bread and butter, your tofu and rice, right? Your meat and potatoes is the main point. That's your speech. And so when you're transitioning in your speech, you are leading them to your evidence, which is found in your main points and in your subpoints. And by leading them through it, you're essentially saying, well, this is what this part is right here, and this is what this part is here, and this is what this part is here. You're taking apart your speech in front of them to highlight what's important about it, right? The 3 things, like in the topic organization, or the chronological order, the past, present, future, or for your second speech, the beginning, middle, end, spatial, where we started, where we stopped in between, where we ended up. Okay? You're leading them on that journey. That's how you lead them through your narrative. There are 3 types of signposts, and that is your previews, like the preview main points or transitions in between the parts, and your summary when you wrap it up at the end of the review main points. That's it. Any questions? Save it for Thursday. We're going to go through these real quick. Chapter 12 is about, what is it? Oh, it's about outlines. About outlines. About your outlines. Preparation outline, right? Preparation outline is anytime you do any kind of outline. Handwritten, type, whatever. When you're given an outline structure by an instructor, like I do, you're given a standard outline form. Finally, speaking notes is like anytime you write notes to yourself, I always recommend students to type up their outlines, print it up, and then when they're practicing before they make their cards, write notes to themselves, make corrections, and so forth. None of these are on the test. Outline form. Use an outline. Do not write it out. Do not ever write out your speech. Do not ever write out your speech. Don't write out your speech. Don't memorize your speech. Don't read off your speech. Ever, 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 ever. We use outline in this class. And then you take your outline and you make your cards from that. Never write out your speech. Here's the main reason why you never write out your speech. However you read at home is not the same speed as you read in front of people. If I'm trying to look, I'm so bad. I don't have, I have books. Look at this. I have books. I need to donate that book. This is my nonfiction. This is my hardcover side. The more fun books are over. Well, those are hardcovers too. No, that's the fiction shelf. This is the nonfiction. So these are the boring books. Okay. But I had this fun book I loved at Costco, and I got it, the visual dictionary book. So let's say I'm gonna read some German to you. Oh my god. Oh, look, I got my reading glasses. Woo. All right. So if I'm reading this off to you, so like at home, I'd be like reading. Oh, I don't want to road signs are so boring, right? There got to be some better words. Where's the animals? Here's the animals. All right, here's the animals. Here's the animals, right? I'm gonna read them in German. Like if I'm reading at home, die Maus, der Hamster, die Ratte. This is squirrel. Das Eckerhäufchen. Ooh, that's a hard even for me. Das Kaninchen. Yeah, Kaninchen. That's a rabbit. Der Eagle El Erizo. That's if I'm talking about Sonic. Der Washbar. That's a raccoon. Now, as I would normally read, right? If I'm speaking in front of somebody, reading off in front of people, this is how most people do, right? They always do this. Die Maus, der Hamster, der Ratte, der Eigenhocken, der Kakenkin, and there I go. They read faster. They read faster. And that's why you don't write out your speeches. You read faster. And if I and they're rare, but this is how people sometimes people read in front of people. They're the mouse. They're hamster. The rat. So never write out your speech. Never read off your speech because however you think you're going to do, you're going to most likely do it faster or even worse, slower, and you lose points. Use an outline. Give your audience a roadmap. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge on the preview main points. But that's what an outline is the roadmap for your speech. Your signpost gives directions during that journey, and the attention getter starts it off and brings them in. Speaking notes work like this. You print out your outline, you practice elaborating from it. While you're doing that, you support and you do citation. For your first speech, there's no citation. So you just think while you're practicing what would work to make it better. And then you give yourself cues and so forth, right? Write little notes. And then once you figure out what works for you, then you make your cards. Simple process. There's one chapter 15. It's a long chapter. I'm going to say that for week 2 content and so forth because we'll talk about the midterm. Chapter 13 and 14. Chapter 13 and 14. Chapter 13 and 14 is the intro and the conclusion. Chapter 13 is the intro. Credibility, there it is. You all know that word. I'm not going to go over it again. Because I'm going to get done with this slide as quick as I can. Anecdote is little stories you tell. They're great. They're awesome, but don't get wrapped up in them. All right. There'd be usually about 2 to 3 sentences worth of words. Rhetorical question. Hit, hit, nudge, nudge. Remember I said you do not ask your audience a question, except for a question that you don't expect to answer. That is a rhetorical question. Rhetorical questions are questions you ask the audience that you know the answer. Everyone knows the answer. So if I say something like, is it fair to say that LA traffic is horrible? You don't expect everyone to go, no. You expect everyone to go, yeah. There's no debate there, right? Because even if you don't drive in LA, you've heard people complain about it. So rhetorical questions are questions you expect the answers. You don't expect the answers. That's why you can ask them, because you don't have anyone going, or yeah, or joining the conversation. Don't do that. The only questions you ever ask your audience is rhetorical. Closure. That's something you get from the conclusion. That's when you wrap it up, right? That's why, by the way, we do the preview, the attention getter member closer using the same material, kind of like that burger. So when they get to the bottom of the burger and it's the same kind of bread, they're like, "This is nicely wrapped. This is solid." Give that closure, that feeling of completion. So there's no confusion if you have the book. I put up on the slide, you can see what we call attention getter. The book calls audience attention. I actually like their phrase for background better than what we use background, and that's introduce subject. But the reason why I keep it background is because the outline is from Cal State LA, and I keep it consistent with the original source. I made some changes, but I'm not going to make a drastic change like that. Reason to listen, audience relevance, establish credibility, speaker credibility. Preview main points is the only thing that the book and the Cal State LA outline have in common. But you notice I put roadmap because hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Your preview main points is a roadmap for your audience. And so that's how important it is. I can't say this enough. Your preview main points is super important. There's introduction techniques. There's 4 of them I recommend. The 2 at the bottom, we don't do at all. Anecdotes, you tell a little story. That's understandable, but at the same time, do not get wrapped up in the story. A nice little story. Facts, we talked about this already. It has to be big facts, something that surprises people, right? If I told you in the last presidential election that if you added Harris and third-party voters together, there would be more voters than Trump voters. That is a true statement, by the way, but it's not surprising, right? When you have multiple candidates together, sometimes they'll get more than the winning candidate. That's not surprising. What is surprising is in the last presidential election, the biggest group of voters were non-voters. More people didn't vote that were able to vote, eligible to vote. They chose not to vote than Trump voters. That's a big fact. That's a hit them over the head fact because no one talks about that. That's a hit them over the head fact. It's also, yeah, I don't want to get into it, but that's a hit them over the head fact. Quotations. Remember, Gandhi quotes are banned. And for those people who randomly find my videos, Gandhi quotes are banned because students misuse them a lot. They also misuse MLK quotes, but I'm not gonna be the white professor who bans Martin Luther King because students use them wrong. But I tell you this, and I tell my students this, and I'm telling you, my students, this because I don't. Whatever quote you use, do not misuse them. All right? Do not misuse them. That's why Gandhi quotes are banned. But yeah, and you. By the way, that's not a student thing. Politicians do it all the time. And the one that they always misuse the most is the "I have a dream" speech quote, because they just want to fit something that's very popular and well known into something that even if it doesn't fit. So, by the way, when you do quotes, say the quote first, then say the person. All right. Events and personal references don't use. I'm not going to even tell you what they are. I'm not going to tell you about it. Don't use. And the 4th one that is not on there, and I talked about essentially analogies. Analogies are awesome. I've given you enough examples of those. Conclusion techniques, it's just a wrap up. Past tense. You only have to say 3 of the things you've already said in the intro, and you just say in the past tense. That's it. And the biggest technique on the conclusion is make sure that a memorable closer has the same stuff like bread as your attention getter. So you wrap up that burger or tofu sandwich in a very nice warm bun, gluten-free. All right. So the other participation for this thing, and then we're going to end this online video, and this is the only online work for today, for this week, is the participation is this. We talked about attention getters and so forth. Write your attention getter. Let's see your words. Not what you're thinking, how you would write it in your outline. That's it. I want to see. We've already talked about attention getters. I had examples already. Let's see what you would write in your outline. If you already wrote it in your outline, you turn it in. And by the way, students, don't worry about being late on your outlines. Just turn your outline in eventually if you haven't turned it in yet. But for right now, so your two participations, I already covered the first one. The second one is what you would write your so those two basic short sentences. What did you use for your attention getter? Remember, your attention getter, if you whatever it is, don't just jump into the speech. It's very important. What students like to do is just talk right into their speech. And like if they want to be a doctor someday and they'll say, you ever go to the doc? No. It sounds like you're making a point. Usually you would say something like, you ever like go to a place that we all like to go to, right? You'd say something like, you ever go to the movies and you have to wait in line, but when you're done with when you finally got in, you got everything. Overall, even if the movie's not that great, it was a wonderful experience. That's what I want to think about. That see how that it is. Bringing them in by using something that's more commonly known. Not everyone knows about, especially with U.S. healthcare. They don't know everything about being a doctor, but they, we've all been to the movies. So use something to lead your audience into it. Don't just jump right in. Don't just start off with your subject. By the way, just a reminder on your intros, do not start off by saying, my name is Professor Hyatt, and I'm going to talk about becoming a film director. Don't do that. Just start with your attention there. All right. If you have questions and so forth, you know what to do. All right. That's it. Have a great day. Top video.